side proposition is that while they provided a lot of analysis as to how poverty is arbitrary and how it impacts people, they never actually told us why the unique policy mechanism of a high threshold of an absolute defense must be applied regardless of the circumstances. It is with this that we challenge the next speaker to respond to the burden that all people living below the poverty line should be absolutely exempted from the law for acquisitive crimes no matter the circumstances. What is our stance? First, we do not believe that living below the poverty line should be an absolute defense against acquisitive crimes. Second, instead, we stand for the status quo, where poverty can be a mitigating factor in a crime. This is distinct from an absolute defense because sentencing is merely reduced but not eliminated. Third, we stand for increased welfare and avenues to help the poor through means like ramping up the welfare programs, the provision of soup kitchens, accessible application processes for state subsidies, and amplifying all other channels for the poor to seek help. We have three arguments. First, that they hurt society. Second, that they harm the poor. And finally, that they in fact worsen disenfranchisement. But before that, some remarks with their side. First, on how the poor are not morally culpable. The core of their analysis, essentially, was that the poor simply had no choice in committing these crimes. First response, they already concede on their side of the house that state help does exist in these circumstances. So clearly, there are other alternatives. So for instance, I may not have to commit a crime if I could get something because I can simply go to soup kitchens, for instance. But secondly, no thank you, we think it's incredibly insulting for them to say that the poor have absolutely no choice. Just think about it. They're essentially saying that because you are poor, you will always commit a crime. There's no agency whatsoever for your individual. We think it's incredibly insulting and demeaning. Just because you're poor does not mean that you have no agency and autonomy to do the right thing. Finally, they never actually responded to the POI, no thank you, that we brought you from our second speaker. We asked them, why is it that if on your side of the house you believe the poor have no choice, then what about cases where they do have choice, like for instance with welfare programs? They never actually provided a response to this on their side. In essence, they only wanted to talk about a very small minority of cases where there was absolutely no choice for these individuals. We urged them to engage with us on the majoritarian ground. Next, they talked about us about how the state was responsible and how poverty is violence. Both were terms that were euphemism for analysis. What does this actually mean? Why does this necessarily translate to absolute defense? We never actually heard any analysis from them in this regard. Finally, and the only term they had to justify absolute defense was self-defense. Other than pointing out that they never actually explain what this is, I will further clash with this in my analysis and substantive data by telling you how self-defense is not met when the poor commit acquisitive crimes. Simply put, it is not a fair defense. Second argument that they have about the poverty cycle. First of all, we'd like to question them if they stand for jail terms for these poor individuals at all. Just think about it. All the analysis was basically saying that if you are poor, going to jail hurts you a lot, so we should not do it for acquisitive crimes. In which case, then why won't you do it for other crimes that the poor do? We want to question and we want to hear a response from the next speaker if the poor commit violent crimes. Do they stand for these people going to jail as well? Because if they do, they heavily concede that there's something more important, no thank you, than the poor not going to jail and breaking the poverty cycle. They concede essentially that there are other things, like justice and fairness, that we have to stand for as well. But crucially, we'll point out, as we'll demonstrate later in our substantive, that in fact, many of these acquisitive crimes actually hurt other poor people as well. So if they want to talk truly about breaking the poverty cycle, then it's on their side of the house where they actually entrench it. First argument, their side hurts society. The thesis of this argument is that the poor committing acquisitive crimes does not meet the high threshold, no thank you, for absolute defense. The premise of this argument is that all societies exist with fundamental rights and protections for everyone. That is why even though we may entertain mitigating factors, we almost never entertain absolute defense. The law is therefore there to prevent us from reverting to a violent and terrible state of nature, and that is why it is important to uphold this. Let us be clear, on opposition, we sympathize entirely with the plight of the poor. We recognize that they face difficult circumstances. In this regard, no thank you, we can grant them leniency through things like mitigating factors, but crucially, this is no reason for them to be completely and absolutely free from the law. The only instance of absolute defense against a crime is self-defense, which is characterized by three things. Here I further clarify their analysis. First, directly responding to that particular actor in the act of self-defense. Secondly, this self-defense must be proportionate. And finally, it must be a measure of last resort. Crucially, poor people committing acquisitive crimes do not fulfill these three metrics. First, because this absolute defense allows for indiscriminate and unconditional acquisition of crimes that allows the poor to target individuals regardless of their complicity in causing their poverty. This absolute defense would apply even the poor was stealing from another poor individual, for instance. Therefore, we think this is clearly absurd. There is nothing of responding directly to someone who is complicit in your suffering. Second, because it is not proportionate as well. Let's be clear, On the other side of the house, they have to stand for an absolute defense against any sort of acquisitive crime. The question then is, how much is too much? If they have a laissez-faire, free-for-all exemption, it does not account for any gradations in the crime being committed whatsoever. So clearly, this is not proportionate as well. Thirdly, because we recognize the agency and autonomy of these individuals, and hence, it is not a last resort for them to commit these crimes. We already talked earlier about how there's state welfare and programs for these people, but the subtext of their argument on their side is that essentially, if you are poor, you have no freedom at all. You are an automaton who necessarily has to commit these crimes. We think this is inherently degrading and insulting to these individuals. Do we perhaps accept that they may have diminished agency because of the academic circumstance? Yes, but we do not accept that they have absolutely no agency that warrants an absolute defense. Second argument, how the other side in fact harms the poor. The thesis of this argument is that committing such acquisitive crimes is in fact counterproductive for the poor. Let's start by recognizing that the plight of the poor is necessarily, let us start by understanding the mindset of the poor. For them, deterrence is not determined merely by the length of the sentence, but must crucially by whether they go to jail or whether they're sentenced at all. To the poor individual, therefore, spending any amount of time in jail is equally damning. Obviously, hence, the policy encourages these individuals to engage in such acquisitive crimes simply because there is no punishment. Problematically, such an incentive structure actually hurts the poor for three reasons. First, because if the poor attempt to steal from the rich, as they are seemingly the most attractive target with the most amount of material possessions, they actually end up hurting themselves more. Why? The rich will merely beef up their defenses in response to this. They merely afford things like security services and police protection. This severely jeopardizes the safety of the poor. Just think about it. If these poor individuals try to steal from the rich, they'll have to climb over barbed fences. They'll be beaten up by security guards. They'll be chased out by vicious guard dogs that the rich can afford. Essentially, what they're standing for is the poor forsaking the safety. Second, if this means instead that the poor resort to stealing from other poor individuals, then they are hurting the very poor people the proposition is trying to protect. So, instead of having poor people being protected, they have single mothers having their very last objects and possessions being stolen from them. They have people targeting the physically handicapped because they're easy to steal from. Simply put, if you want to protect the most vulnerable, their side is not the policy to do this, and hence, all of this results in an incredible miscarriage of justice. Finally, because acquisitive crimes by nature are likely to escalate. Absolute defense against acquisitive crimes does not mean defense against acquisitive violence and its associated violence. This means that, for instance, if a robbery escalates because, I don't know, in the process of a robbery you're trying to assault someone, this means that poor people will still have to go to jail for that particular assault, that particular violence. This, in fact, hurts the poor even more in the long run and takes away what little economic opportunity they are already given when they're incentivized to steal because they end up in jail for a far longer period of time on their side of the house. Hence, on opposition, we're proud to stand by the baseline that absolute power hurts absolutely, and that is why we do not stand for an absolute defense.